going to start to do a series of movies based on some more pop cultural ideas. In this case, I would like to take on the Marvel Universe. They just finished up their big 10-year story arc, which of course ended with Endgame. And I'd like to go over the movies, discuss some ideas about it, and I'll grade them. I used to be a professor, so we'll do A, B, C, D, F, and give them some scores over the overall movies. And I'm going to start out doing the Iron Man movies, which is what we're going to work on today, and then Captain America, Thor, the Avengers, some of the other movies, the more general ones that are individual, like Black Panther and Ant-Man and the Wasp, things like that. And I'll probably end up with the Guardians in the Galaxy. Now, in fairness, I used to collect comics. I've been a comic reader for most of, as a child, and have kept up with them on and off for most of my adult life. I don't read them much anymore, but I do to keep up on the storylines, and I do enjoy some of the movies and series and stuff that are handled on it. And I've enjoyed, on overall, I've enjoyed the Marvel movies. But we're going to talk about these movies as from a more critical point of view, and grade them and talk about their strengths and weaknesses. Now, the first movie, of course, I was going to talk about is Iron Man, and that was directed by Jon Favreau, and of course, based on the character design by, of course, Stan Lee, and it starred Robert Downey Jr., of course, Terrence Howard, Jeff Bridges, and I think it was Sean Toob and Gwyneth Paltrow were the main cast. And of course, released by Paramount in 2008. The movie runs about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours, and it originally budget on it was about $140 million. And one of the things that was surprising about Iron Man, of course, is that it made almost $600 million. So generally, double its budget is considered a success. Triple its budget is a big success. This one obviously did what, 2, 4, 6 times the budget. So it was a big success. In a lot of ways, it started some of the issues. It started the Marvel Universe, because the idea that you could make movies about superheroes that were realistic. Now, in fairness sake, other movies in the past based on heroes did make money. I mean, if you don't believe that, you've obviously never seen Blade. You've never seen, and there were other movies that had comic book characters in it that were successful. Obviously, Superman. Chris Reeves, Superman 1, Superman 2. After that, they get pretty weak, but Superman 1 and Superman 2 are really good movies. Now, when you look at Iron Man, the way I judge a movie is I own a copy of this movie, so I consider it to be a good movie. I'll get ahead of myself and give you the grade on it, and I would say this movie is an A. It's a 90. It's not an A, 95 or 100, but it's a 90. It's either a high B or a low A, depending on your point of view. The characters are interesting in it. I know a lot. Tony Stark is an interesting character. He's a flawed man, and we're getting into how he's correcting his life. He's lived a life of privilege, and now he's having to come to deals with the fact that his weapons are being used to kill people and endangering himself. He knew they were killing people. In this case, killing innocent people. And it was a transformation movie about how you become a hero. And then, and it was hilarious. I mean, it had tremendously funny parts in it. The characterization on a whole is very good. And a lot of people were somewhat critical of some of the villain in this piece, of course, which is Jeff Bridges. Now, Jeff Bridges is like Robert Downey Jr. is a fine actor, and he, of course, plays Obadiah Stane. And I thought he was a good villain, actually, personally. He's a greedy, corrupt, amoral businessman who believes that he can do anything he wants to make money. Obadiah Stane is a underrated villain. I think he actually is a normal, like I said, corrupt businessman. And when you look at his character, I mean, he's been nursing Tony Stark a lot. He's brilliant, but he's a worthless human being who, a hedonistic, does whatever he wants, spoiled little rich boy. And I mean, his father before him had a lot of that too, until he finally got married to Maria. So I mean, how much of Stane is having to deal with this with two Starks? So, you know, he's the one keeping the company going and making a lot of money. Now he's amoral and he's and all that, but I mean, you can kind of understand a little bit why having to shepherd along these jackasses that he may actually have had enough and be willing to do anything to make money. I think that it wasn't brought out enough in the character in the actual movies, and in the end, they kind of just made him into a rar. I have armor. Of course, when you finally have power and everything, who knows exactly that armor gave him power, and suddenly he has a whole different opinion about it. Um, Anybody who's ever ridden in like a bulldozer or a tank can tell you it's a whole nother sensation when you actually get into something that has that kind of power behind it. So again, this movie is a good movie. I would give it an A. I own a copy of it. Paramount Pictures, a little over 2 hours. Um, 140 million budget, made around $600 million. Financial success, laid the groundwork entirely for the rest of the Marvel universe from that point on. Because when you get right down to it, if it hadn't been as successful, if Iron Man hadn't been successful, we'd have probably never had First Avenger or Thor. They would have said, okay, you can't make a lot of money on that. And of course, and they did. They made an insane amount of money because Marvel Comics wanted to actually figured if they made movies about their comics, they'd sell more comics. And now the comic industry aspect of Marvel is almost totally irrelevant because one of their movies makes multiples of the money that their comics make every year. So kind of go figure that out. Anyway, so having gone through it, decent movie, decent cast. I'd recommend watching it. Let's move on to Iron Man 2. Again, Jon Favreau again is the director. Kevin Feige starting to show up again as a producer in this point, and I'm not sure I like Feige or not. He's involved with all the Marvel movies, but I'm not sure he's a benefit or a burden to them. But that's another matter. Of course, cast is again it's Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow. It has Don Cheadle now, who is now moved to become Rhodey. I think he's an improvement in it. And I don't want to get into the issues. Apparently, the other actor wasn't getting paid enough, and there was all kinds of conflicts. And I honestly, Steve, my you look at me and go, Professor Arms, why are you talking about this? And I go, I don't really care about that, the idiosyncrasies of that stuff. I don't care about the politics. I don't care about I wouldn't read a fanzine and stuff like that. I'm interested in the movies and what it produced. Okay, so I could care less about that. Sam Rockwell is one of the villains. He plays Justin Hammer. And Mickey Rourke plays Ivan Vanko, the other villain in it. And we have the introduction of the Black Widow's character, which is Charlotte Johansson. Again, Marvel Studios with Paramount. Again, it came out in 2010. And again, it was a successful movie. Not as successful, about as successful as Iron Man was proportionally. I mean, it had a bigger budget, so it was around 200 million, and it made about 625 million. So, still made plenty of money for people who were interested in it. Now, when you look at the structure of this movie, again, it's Iron Man having to deal with himself now as a hero, that hero's journey that he's having to make. But you run into the added issue that he finds out he's dying from poisoning from his arc reactor, and now he's having to deal with his mortality. He doesn't have very much time left. And again, he's irresponsible in the first movie and irresponsible before, and he does a lot of irresponsible things in this also. And that's one of the main aspects of the story is him having to deal with the fact that he's poisoned and dealing with his mortality. He's turning his company over to Pepper. He's making sure that Rhodey gets a copy of an Iron Man type suit so he can become a new Iron Man. He's getting ready for the idea that he is probably, that he's going to die. He doesn't see a solution to the poisoning in it. The this movie has three very interesting characters in it. One of them is or three. There are supposed to be two villains that are supposed to be interesting characters. One of them is, one of them isn't. And then you have the Black Widow is the other character most people are concerned with, Scarlett Johansson's character. Again, when you look at Justin Hammer, Hammer should be a great villain because in the comics he was a great villain. He was drawn by Bob Layton in the classic level of Iron Man's at some of his best. His Demon in the Bottle and his Armor Wars stories are some of the best Iron Man's ever written. And he drew Justin Hammer as if his resemblance was to Peter Cushing, who is the famous British actor, and for those who don't know him, he's Moff Tarkin in Star Wars. So he planned on him being Stark's intellectual equal, kind of like the idea of what they did with Stain, as you know, as a corrupt businessman, but a brilliant man who's patient, willing to do what he needs to accomplish what he wants. He actually overrides Iron Man's armor and has him blow a hole through the Secretary General of the United Nations with his repulsor ray while he's patting him on the back. I mean, Iron Man has to deal with a murder potential charge in that, and one of the better Iron Man stories that was ever done. So he's a good character in the movie. He's a throwaway. Nobody cares. He's annoying. He's kind of just a kind of a dweeb villain who's got his company and makes secondhand Iron Man. Secondhand Tony Stark tech is all it is. Now the other character in it is Ivan Venko, which is played by Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke's a really good actor. And he worked a lot on this character, and apparently there's a lot of character development that was thrown away out of this movie, probably from pressure from the studios, is what I understand. Because Favreau is still the same director, and he's a good director. I mean, everything I've seen of his, I've liked. The last thing I saw of him was the Jungle Book he did, interpretation, very good. Interpretation of the Jungle Book. I enjoyed it a lot. So in this case, um, you think the movie dropped a full, and it dropped from a 90 to an 80 in my mind, and it could just be a weaker story and all that, but I think there's other factors that got involved in it too. So Benko's character, again, he's a cross of the Crimson Dynamo from the comic books and Whiplash, two of Iron Man's villains. Um, Ivan Venko I remember when I saw the name of his father in it. I can't, it slips my mind right now what his father's first name was, but I checked it, and it's the name of the Crimson Dynamo from the comic books. So I mean, they obviously were thinking along Crimson Dynamo, and his armor in the end had electrical powers, which is what the Crimson Dynamo's armor has, and he's also Russian. So the other character that was introduced that got a lot of people's attention, of course, was the Black Widow, and played by Scarlett Johansson. I did like the scene where her and Happy were busting into Justin Hammer's um, his facility to stop Venko, and Happy's having to do the old-fashioned way, just punch people and fight and box. And of course, Scarlett Johansson gets to flip around and do all these incredible martial arts things thank God you have stunt doubles for. And as there's zappy things, there are widow stings and all that. It's a good scene. Though actually, in a way, I almost like Happy's part of it better because I like Happy for one thing, and also because he's doing it the old-fashioned way. He doesn't have superpowers. So anyway, I the Black Widow will become a big part of the Marvel continuity all the way through Endgame. She pops up here and there in movies. I've never really understood the big draw of her because she was a Russian spy who had a love affair with Hawkeye originally. Hawkeye was a criminal. She was a Russian spy. They both reform. They both become Avengers. La la, kissy kissy, lovey lovey. This is way back, like in the 1960s. They'd be around 1966, 67 back in the Avengers when they're like in the Avengers 30 and 40s type of thing. But the problem I have with them is they're just rip-offs of Green Arrow and the Black Widow. The Black Canary. I mean, you've got a character who, in the comics, she ran around in a bustier with tights. I mean, that's Black Canary. He's an archer. He's Purple Arrow instead of Green Arrow, and he's just not as good a shot as Green Arrow. And so Iron Man 3 is easily the weakest of the three movies. It takes elements from Marvel Comics. In this case, it's something called the Extremis virus, which is a techno-organic virus they introduced in Iron Man. It sucked in the comics as a storyline. It sucked in this movie too. Again, all the normal people you'd expect: Downey, Paltrow, Cheadle. Again, Favreau's in it again. We have what is it? Guy Pearce is Aldrich Killian, I believe, is the villain in the piece. He's the one who he didn't invent the extremists, but he got it from somebody else and developed it. And it's we'll get into that more when I get into the story. And of course, Ben Kingsley, who is the quote unquote the Mandarin in this movie, one of the really parts of this movie that really made it suck. Again, this now is being distributed by Walt Disney, so we are now in the realm of the Disney world, and that is not a place. In some ways, I think actually Disney buying Marvel, it may have made a lot of successful movies, but I think they probably made their movies worse by doing it. This movie is probably If I were generous, I'd give it a C. I think I'd be too generous. I'd be having to grade it, feeling sorry for it. It's probably a D. It's not worth your time. And the main point of the plot in it, because you have again this character who comes to Iron Man when he is young and has this idea for this new technology, and Iron Man, of course, is drunken playboy, and just blows him off, and the guy ends up going down a dark path and yada yada yada, and becomes a villain in the future. Okay, we've seen this movie before. It's called The Incredibles, the first Incredibles. So I mean, congratulations, your villain in Iron Man, your extremist virus is just simply a version of Syndrome. Syndrome's a better villain. And then that's the problem with this one. Of course, it's 2013, Walt Disney Studios. So one of the longest movies is like 130 minutes, 31 minutes long. It's longer, which is sad because it didn't have anything to say. But the thing about it is, it made a lot of money. But by this point, Downey has gotten really popular in the movies, and the other movies, the Cap movies and the Thor movies, the Avengers movies have made them so that people are much more interested in going to see them, because it made over $1 billion and cost about 200 million to make. So it was very successful, even though it's a piece of trash. And Downey might argue with me. He probably thinks some of the plot and character development, but most of it just put me to sleep. I mean, it was boring. I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't care about at this point. I didn't even care about Iron Man anymore. Him feeling sorry of his post-traumatic from the New York, trauma and all that. It was just it's old. Let your heroes be heroes. I don't mind them having flaws, but you don't have to make them, psychopaths. I mean, that's DC. DC has all the psychopaths. I mean, make there's nothing wrong with just having a reasonable movie. And him, going out and the Mandarin, and of course, the Mandarin is probably Iron Man's definitive villain. He's almost like the Doctor Doom of the Fantastic Four, or the Lex Luthor against Superman, though not counting the Lex Luthor in the Schneider movies, because he is horrible. But anyway, but in this case, he's a very dangerous villain. He's very old. He has this amazing technology at his fingertips, literally, and he's able to do these amazing things. He's a brilliant strategist, and he is a very powerful Iron Man villain. And when I heard the Mandarin's going to be in it, I said, well, maybe this movie will be okay. And then, of course, it didn't. Of course, Favreau didn't direct this. It's directed by a guy named Shane Black. So the whole point is that, and that's probably a part of the fault in it too. And also, I'm sure Disney was happy because they got a lot of money out of it, but they didn't necessarily make a good movie in the process. The Extremist it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's again, I accept comic book physics. I accept that comic books do not have to make a whole lot of sense, but there are limits to what I'm willing to accept. And the virus that causes people to go up to 1,000 degrees and melt things and super strong. It's just, they did it in the comics and it was stupid, and they did it in this is stupid. If it were Doctor Strange and it's magic, I might have bought it, but technology generally has to obey some physical laws, guys. And the weird part about it is, in the end of it, Pepper's infected with the virus and helps save Iron Man in the end. And him changing armor and blowing up armor, and it's just, yada, yada, yada. It got to be just stupid. And I go, the most stupid I thought in the end of it was they should have since Pepper managed to control the extremist virus and not blow up, they should have just put her on the Avengers and said, screw Iron Man, you can go home and build armor. Once you can go home and bake cookies, and she'll work for a living out with the Avengers, or bake transistors or whatever Iron Man bakes. So I mean, I'm being really hard on this movie, but this movie really deserves it. It is not worth your time. Okay. So the overall, the problem is, so if you look at these movies, you've got a 90, you've got an A, you've got a B, and then you've got a D. Well, a B and a D is a C, and of course, and a C and an A is a B. So Iron Man movies overall are strong B movies if you put them all together. If you watch all three of them together, it would be a bad mistake, because you'll go, well, that one was good, and that one was okay, and that one sucks. See, that's the problem you'd have. Don't watch them all together. Watch them with some time in between if you're going to do it. And I don't recommend you watching the third one at all. The second one is your choice on it. It's worth your time, but it's not great by any means. Again, now I have a comic book perspective on this, because I've read Iron Man since Tales of Suspense, and some of the best stuff, most of the stuff they did with when you look at the Downey Jr. version of Iron Man, he's very similar to Bob Layton's Iron Man, which is sometimes considered some of the best Iron Man stories that were ever written. Iron Man Stark becomes an alcoholic in that period. That's again when we have Justin Hammer. That has he has his armor wars in those stories where his technology is being stolen by people, which is of course a variation of what the first Iron Man movie has. So that's why the first one is a good movie and the other ones aren't, or not as good. Like I said, I give full credit to Favreau. He did as best that he could in the second movie with the studios screwing with him. And I really like Iron Man. I have to make that comment. Iron Man's a good character. I've always enjoyed him in the comics. I personally am a big Thor fan. I've always liked Thor as a comic. So I mean, I like Thor better than Iron Man or Cap or any other of the heroes. So you're gonna probably find I'm going to be very critical when you get to the Thor sections, because I know I've read every Thor comic there was, other than currently. I've given up on the stuff recently because it's trash. But I have a pretty strong opinions on that. But I'm very well read on comics, and the movies are not comics, but they are where the origins from where they come. And in a way, it's good because it, in theory, will make people want to read comics more. The only problem with that is that the comics they're putting out currently are horrible. I mean, they're following the worst ideas of the movies rather than the best ideas. And the best ideas of the movies are often things that were written a long time ago by when you had people who were concerned with story and continuity and plot, who wanted to advance characters along the line and wanted them to be heroes, not them just to be money-making machines. So I think this is probably a good place to wrap this up. Again, Iron Man movies. I enjoy Iron Man. I think Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of him is good. The problem with Iron Man, of course, is, and my nephew's a big Iron Man fan, like I said, so he may disagree with me, but he's kind of an ass in the comics, and he's definitely one in the movie. And as his story moves on through the Avengers and other issues, we're going to find out that he is a cause of a lot of trouble because of his arrogance and sometimes his short-sightedness. In his enthusiasm to solve a problem, he actually makes a worse problem than he needs to. And that's something that you actually can see in the Iron Man movies also. So, but having said that, he does do the transition of being a hero. Downey Jr. makes a character you really like, so I would recommend these movies on a whole. The first two, the third one if you really have nothing better to do. So thank you for listening, and I will do my next series I do of this sort. I'll do on Captain America.
If you wish to join the quest for knowledge, the battle for truth, please hit the like button, recommend my channel to others, and of course subscribe. Thank you kindly.